Fun matchup here. It's going to be interesting to see how Mertens can deal with Eala because a lot of players are struggling on the grass against Eala. I'm going to go with Eala in a close straight set. I reckon her form and her confidence right now is just so high, and it's so hard to go past her, especially against players that are playing similar games to the players that Eala's been beating. So I'm going to go Eala in a close straight set.
Elise Mertens has a problem, not a small one, not the kind you brush aside with experience, rankings, or a favorable head-to-head record. This is a very specific problem, a very dangerous problem, and right now it might be the single worst first-round draw she could have asked for on grass. Her name is Alex Eala. When the Bad Homburg draw came out and Mertens saw that name sitting across from hers in round one, you have to imagine there was at least a flicker of tension. Maybe it was just a glance that lingered a little too long. Maybe it was the kind of reaction a professional player hides instantly. But if Elise Mertens felt absolutely nothing when she saw Alex Eala waiting for her in the opening round, then one of two things has to be true. Either she is unbelievably composed, or she somehow managed to ignore everything that happened in Berlin last week, and that would be almost impossible. Because the player walking onto that grass court against her in Bad Homburg is not just another opponent who had a nice tournament, she is not just someone riding a hot streak or enjoying a lucky week. Alex Eala is arriving with something far more dangerous than momentum. She is arriving with proof that her grass court game is real. Proof that the biggest names on the WTA Tour can be broken down by her shot selection, her timing, her left-handed patterns, and her growing confidence. Proof that what happened in Berlin was not an accident, not a fluke, and definitely not something Elise Mertens can afford to dismiss. Because this match is not just a first-round contest. This feels like unfinished business. This feels like revenge. Alex Eala has not forgotten Madrid in April. She has not forgotten walking onto a clay court against Mertens and getting dismissed 6-2, 6-1 as if she barely belonged in the same conversation. She has not forgotten the Jasmine Open in 2023 either. Another clay court meeting, another Mertens win, another reminder that on that surface, the matchup belonged entirely to the Belgian. 2 meetings, 2 losses, both on clay, both convincing, both leaving Eala with very little room to argue about who was better in those moments. Mertens owned that rivalry on clay. She controlled the rhythm, controlled the exchanges, and controlled the scoreboard. But here is where the story changes. Elise Mertens is not walking into Bad Homburg with the same comfort those earlier wins gave her. She is not stepping onto this court with the same certainty, the same momentum, or the same tactical edge she had in Madrid and Monaster. In fact, she is walking into this match at a moment when her own grass court season has started to wobble, while Alex Eala is showing up as the most dangerous version of herself we have ever seen. And that is what makes this matchup so fascinating, because if you only look at the head-to-head, you miss the real story. The real story starts in Berlin. You genuinely cannot overstate what Alex Eala did there. She entered the tournament as a wild card. No seeding, no protection. No soft path through the draw, no luxury of easing into the week against a lower-ranked opponent while the top names battled each other somewhere else. She came in with no guarantees and no favors, and then spent 7 days turning one of the strongest grass court fields in women's tennis into her personal breakout stage. She did not just survive Berlin. She announced herself there, and she did it in a way that changes the way this Mertens match has to be viewed. In the opening round, Eala drew Donna Vekic. On paper, that is already a brutal start, but it becomes even more dangerous when you remember what Vekic had just done. She had won the HSBC Championships at Queen's Club the week before, lifting a WTA 500 title and looking every bit like one of the most informed grass court players on the tour. She had just gone through a tournament and proven that her game was clicking on the surface. She had confidence, rhythm, recent wins, and a title in her bag. Eala beat her anyway, 7-5, 6-4, and the scoreline almost undersells how impressive it was. There was no panic, no chaotic dip in level, no sense that Eala was hanging on and hoping Vekic would crack. She played that match with control. She played it with precision. She absorbed pressure, redirected it, and looked far more comfortable than anyone should look against a reigning grass court champion in the opening round of a WTA event. That alone would have been enough to make people pay attention. But Berlin was only getting started. The second round brought Elena Rybakina, and that is the moment this whole story shifted from promising run to what exactly are we watching right now? Because Rybakina on grass is not just another big-name opponent. She is one of the most naturally dangerous grass court players in the modern women's game, Her serve stays low and skids through the court. Her ball striking is clean, flat, and ruthless. She does not need long rallies to hurt you. She can take over a grass match in minutes if your returns sit up or your depth disappears for even a couple of games. She came into Berlin not just as the top seed, not just as world number 2, but as one of the clearest Wimbledon contenders in the entire draw. And Alex Eala beat her too, again in straight sets. Again 7-5, 6-4. That was the moment the tennis world stopped treating her run like a curiosity and started treating it like a warning. Because once is a good win, twice starts to feel real. Beating Vekic can happen if you catch someone flat. Beating Rybakina right after that on grass, with that same level of calm and control, is something else entirely. That was not luck. That was not a bracket opening up. That was not a top seed having a random bad day. That was a young player stepping into one of the fastest courts on the calendar and outplaying one of the best grass court players in the world. And still, Eala was not done. The quarterfinal gave her Elina Svitolina, the Italian Open champion, world number 8, and a player who had looked sharp through the transition from clay into grass. Svitolina is the kind of opponent who can expose impatience. She makes you earn points. She gives very little away. She forces you to play one more ball, hit one more angle, find one more layer of conviction in the rally. If your level dips, she takes the match away from you quietly and efficiently. Eala beat her too, 6-3, 6-4. Now pause for a second and really take in what that means. 3 consecutive straight-set wins. Donna Vekic, fresh off a grass court title. Elina Rybakina, world number 2 and one of the most feared players on the surface. Elina Svitolina, a top 10 player and one of the most disciplined competitors on the tour, all in the same week, all on grass, all beaten in straight sets. That was Alex Eala's 6th career top 10 win, and her 4th top 10 win of the 2026 season alone. She was not sneaking through matches with tiebreak luck or surviving collapses from the other side of the net. She was imposing herself. She was dictating. She was forcing elite players to react to her, and that is the kind of shift that changes how an entire locker room sees you. By the time Berlin ended, the conversation around Eala had completely changed. Yes, she lost in the semifinals to Linda Noskova, but context matters. Losing a semifinal on grass after taking out Rybakina and Svitolina in the same tournament is not a failure. It is not a collapse. It is not the part of the story anyone is going to remember. What people will remember is that she walked into one of the biggest grass events before Wimbledon as a wild card and left it looking like a player who might be seeded at major tournaments before long. She left Berlin with her live ranking climbing to world number 30. She left with analysts suddenly talking about Wimbledon possibilities around her name. She left with broadcasters dissecting her patterns, her lefty angles, and her comfort on grass. She left with a reputation that had changed in real time. And somewhere in that draw, Elise Mertens was watching. Which brings us back to Bad Homburg, because the reason this first-round matchup feels so loaded is not just because Eala is in form. It is because the entire head-to-head history between these two women was built on a surface that rewards Mertens, and now they are meeting on a surface that may reward Eala even more. That difference matters. In fact, it may be the entire story. Let's start with Mertens. On clay, Elise Mertens is a nightmare for players who are still figuring out how to construct points at the highest level. She is patient. She is organized. She redirects pace beautifully off the backhand wing. She extends rallies, absorbs aggression, and turns matches into physical and mental puzzles. Her depth is reliable. Her defense is disciplined. She does not need to blow you off the court because on clay she can simply keep forcing you to hit one more shot, then one more after that, until your level drops or your frustration rises. That is exactly what happened in those earlier meetings with Eala. The slow surface gave Mertens time to read the patterns. The high bounce helped her neutralize pace and pull rallies back into her preferred shape. The longer exchanges exposed Eala's inexperience and denied her the quick first strike tennis that grass rewards. Those 6-2, 6-1 and 7-5, 6-0 scorelines were not flukes. They were a reflection of a matchup that, at the time, heavily favored Mertens on that surface. But grass strips away so much of what makes clay comfortable for a player like Mertens. On grass, the rallies shorten. The bounce stays low and awkward. The court rewards players who are willing to take the ball early, attack off the return, flatten out the forehand, and use the serve as more than just a way to begin the point. Grass does not always give defenders enough time to settle into patterns. It does not always let you stretch rallies until your opponent loses patience. Sometimes the point is already gone before that part of your game even gets to matter. And when you look at Alex Eala's game on grass, it suddenly becomes obvious why Mertens should be uncomfortable. Eala's left-handed serve is a real problem on this surface. On the deuce side, it can drag right-handed opponents wide and open the court immediately. That one pattern alone creates space most players do not get for free. Her forehand, when she steps into it early, is not just solid anymore. On grass, it becomes a first-strike weapon. She can take pace, redirect it, and hit through the court before a defender has time to reset. She is also growing more comfortable finishing points quickly rather than overplaying them, and that shift has been visible all grass season. But the most interesting part of Eala's grass court development might be something more technical. During the Berlin tournament, Tracy Austin highlighted one of the underrated reasons Eala looks so natural on grass. She gets down to low balls extremely well. That sounds like a small detail until you remember what grass actually does to the ball. It skids, it stays low, it bounces unevenly. It forces players into awkward contact points and uncomfortable footwork patterns. If you cannot handle that, you end up half-volleying from the baseline, mistyming routine shots, or defending from positions that constantly feel unstable. Eala handles that low bounce better than most players her age. She bends well, stays balanced, and adjusts quickly. Combine that with her ability to mix in slice, vary height, and suddenly flatten the ball when she sees an opening, and you start to understand why her game looks so alive on this surface. This is not just a clay court player trying to survive on grass. This is someone who might genuinely be built for it. And that is the part Mertens has to be worried about, because the version of Alex Eala she beat on clay is not the version showing up in Germany. Something clicked. Maybe it is confidence. Maybe it is timing. Maybe it is simply that her natural weapons finally found the right surface at the right moment. But whatever it is, the result is obvious. Eala looks freer, more aggressive, more decisive, and far more certain of what she wants to do in points. Meanwhile, Mertens' own grass court season has not exactly been a smooth build-up. She opened her swing at Hertogenbosch, where she arrived as the defending champion after winning the event in 2025. That should have been the perfect place to settle in. Familiar conditions, good memories, a surface she generally handles well, and for one match, things looked manageable. She beat Bianca Andreescu in the opener and seemed on track for another solid week. Then came the second round against Elena Gabriela Ruse, and the run ended there. That by itself would not be catastrophic. Players lose. Early grass events are tricky. Timing is still forming. But it mattered because of what came next in Berlin. In the first round there, Mertens had to fight through a messy three-setter against Lyudmila Samsonova. She lost the opening set 1-6 and looked uncomfortable before recovering to grind her way back into the match. On one hand, you can call that resilience. On the other, it was another sign that her grass level was not exactly stable. Then came Nikola Bartenkova, a 20-year-old Czech wild card who had already surprised people in the draw. Mertens lost 6-1, 6-4, and it was not one of those scorelines that hides a close match. Bartenkova's creativity, angles, and willingness to come forward took Mertens apart. The Belgian never really looked in control. She was being rushed, stretched, and forced to react to a style that grass tends to reward. That matters because if a young wild card with variety and confidence can put Mertens under that kind of pressure. What exactly is Alex Eala supposed to do to her a week later after beating Rybakina and Svitolina? That is the question hanging over this matchup. Mertens entered Bad Homburg with a 2-2 grass court record for the season. Eala entered with the best week of her career on the surface and wins over some of the biggest names in the sport. Mertens' losses did not come against top 10 players. Eala's wins did. One player is trying to find rhythm. The other is arriving with the kind of belief that can change an entire tournament. And then there is the mental side of it all, which may be the biggest advantage Eala has. Confidence in tennis is a strange thing because it is invisible until it is. Sometimes you can see it in the way a player serves on break point. Sometimes you hear it in the sound of the ball coming off the strings. Sometimes it shows up in the shot selection, in the willingness to go big at 30, all instead of retreating into safety. Right now, Alex Eala looks like a player who believes. Not in the abstract, not in the motivational poster sense of the word, but in the competitive, dangerous sense. She looks like a player who has seen what her best level can do against elite opposition and now walks onto the court expecting it to matter. Beating Rybakina on grass changes the way you see yourself. Backing it up against Svitolina changes it even more. Suddenly, you are not hopping to belong at this level. You know you belong. Mertens, on the other hand, has to reset mentally from a disappointing Berlin exit and then immediately face someone the tennis world spent the last week hyping as a Wimbledon dark horse. That is not a comfortable position for any player, let alone one whose own recent form has been shaky. Yes, Mertens still owns the head-to-head 2-0, but those wins feel older than they are. They happened on clay. They happened before Eala's grass court identity fully emerged. They happened against a version of Alex Eala that was still learning where her weapons could do the most damage. This is not that version anymore. This version comes with sharper timing, a more dangerous serve pattern, greater willingness to attack, and something maybe even more important, emotional memory, because athletes do not forget certain scorelines. They do not forget the matches where they were made to feel small, where every pattern seemed to fail, where the scoreboard moved too fast and the answers never came. Those losses to Mertens on clay are sitting somewhere in Eala's mind, whether she admits it publicly or not. Madrid is there, Monaster is there, the feeling of being outplayed, outmaneuvered, and dismissed is there. And now she gets another shot, not on clay, on grass, on the surface that may have just unlocked her future. That is why this matchup feels bigger than a normal first-round meeting. It is not just about ranking points or form. It is about timing. It is about a rivalry being relocated onto completely different terrain. It is about a young player arriving at the exact moment her confidence and her surface fit are starting to align, and finding across the net the one opponent who has repeatedly told her, with absolute clarity, that she was not ready yet. What better way to answer that than here? What better way to tell the tour that Berlin was only the beginning than by beating the player who had your number before everything changed? And from Mertens' perspective, that is exactly why this draw is so uncomfortable. Because she does not just have to face a talented opponent. She has to face a talented opponent with momentum, with revenge in mind, with a growing grass court identity, and with recent wins that are objectively bigger than anything Mertens has produced on the surface this season. She has to face a player whose confidence is climbing and whose style is suddenly becoming a nightmare matchup. She has to face a player who is no longer trying to prove she belongs on tour, but trying to prove she can beat anyone on the right day. And if you are Elise Mertens, there is one part of this that may be hardest to ignore, the sense that the surface has flipped the script. On clay, Mertens could turn the court into a place where Eala's aggression had to be earned one extra shot at a time. On grass, Eala gets to ask the questions first. She gets to take the return early. She gets to use the lefty serve to stretch the court. She gets to attack short balls before Mertens settles. She gets to turn defense into discomfort instead of letting Mertens turn patience into control. That does not mean Mertens cannot win. Of course she can. She is too experienced, too intelligent, and too accomplished to be written off in round one of any tournament. She knows how to problem solve. She knows how to absorb momentum. She knows how to expose nerves if Eala feels the pressure of expectation after Berlin. But that is exactly the point. For Mertens to win this match, she may have to do a lot more problem-solving than anyone expected when the grass season began. Because this is no longer the old matchup. This is not the clay court version of Alex Eala walking back into a familiar trap. This is a player who just spent a week beating elite grass court names in straight sets, a player whose ranking is rising, a player whose confidence is visible, and a player who now has every reason to believe that what once looked like a bad matchup might actually have been a surface problem all along. And if that is true, then Bad Homburg is not just another stop on the calendar. It is a test of whether Berlin was the beginning of something real. A test of whether Mertens' previous wins still carry any psychological weight once the ball starts skidding low through the grass. A test of whether Eala's new level can survive the pressure of expectation. And maybe, more than anything else, a test of whether revenge in tennis ever arrives in a more perfect package than this. Because think about the setup. You have the young rising player who just shocked the tennis world on grass. You have the experienced opponent who beat her twice before and now has to deal with the transformed version. You have a surface that changes everything. You have recent form pointing in opposite directions. and you have a first-round draw that feels like it should be happening much later in the week because of how much history, tension, and meaning it already carries. That is why this match matters. That is why people are paying attention. And that is why Elise Mertens should be concerned. Not because Alex Eala might play well for a set or two, not because the crowd might get behind the underdog, not because one upset in Berlin happened to go her way. She should be concerned because Alex Eala suddenly looks like a grass court problem. A real one. A player with a serve pattern that can expose angles, a forehand that can rush defenders, movement low to the ground that fits the surface, and a level of confidence that is impossible to fake after the week she just had. A player who now understands, maybe for the first time, that she does not need a perfect draw or a perfect day to threaten elite opponents. She can do it by force. And when a player discovers that about herself, the entire tone of her career can change. So yes, Mertens still has 2 wins in this rivalry. Yes, she has already shown she can dismantle Eala on clay. Yes, experience still matters. And yes, there is every chance she walks out and reminds everyone that she is far too savvy to be caught in someone else's revenge story. But if you are looking at the direction of these 2 players right now, if you are looking at the surface, the recent results, the confidence levels, and the emotional baggage both women are bringing into this match, it becomes very hard to ignore where the pressure really sits. It sits with Mertens. Because Eala is not coming to Bad Homburg just to play a first-round match. She is coming to settle something. She is coming to rewrite the memory of those clay court losses. She is coming to test whether the player who once controlled her can still do it when the conditions no longer protect that style. She is coming to send one more message before Wimbledon. And if the version of Alex Eala we saw in Berlin shows up again, that message could be loud. Mertens has 2 wins in this rivalry. Alex Eala has the momentum, the surface, and the belief to turn that story upside down. And that is why Elise Mertens has a problem, a very specific problem, a very dangerous one. And in Bad Homburg, she is about to find out just how real that problem has become.